Good day, Temecula Valley math leaders, and welcome back to our Tesseract project, lesson number 3, structures and protocols. Before we get into today's lesson, let's do a quick recap of what we've done so far and point us in the direction of what we're going to cover today. The purpose of the Tesseract project, as we shared before, is to radically improve the math education in our schools through focused, customized professional development of our leadership, not the leaders above us, but our leadership in particular. Last time we looked at the kind of the middle of that purpose, and we dealt with what does it mean to radically improve the math education at our schools. So you looked at the mission and vision of your school, core values, how it aligned to the district mission and vision. And then you also set out a big, hairy, audacious goal that you stated to our project community here, the colleagues within the Tesseract cohort. And then we did that to kind of lay the groundwork of where we want to go. So what would that radically improved math education look like at your school? That's what we did with the last lesson. Now we're going to look at the tail end of that purpose at the leadership, but not so much the interpersonal leadership of ourselves, the teachers, but how our leadership impacts the system. Because remember our 3 axioms. In order for students to improve, teachers need to improve. Teachers don't improve until our leadership improves and our systems are getting exactly the results they were designed to get. So if we want different results, we need to change the system. And who controls that system? We do. So our leadership does deal with how we interact with the teachers, but we're going to be specifically looking at how our leadership influences the systems that thus influence the teachers. And I'm going to refer to this book, The Fifth Discipline. It's the art and practice of the learning organization. This is by Peter Senge. And in this book, he talks a lot about how to change organizations, bring about continuous improvement through the systems. And rather than going through and hitting all the various buttons of your system that you want to change, is you want to look for a place within your system that you can apply leverage. So that's the term I'm going to introduce today, is this idea of leverage on the system. So how do you get leverage on the system to impart change? And then where within the system can you find leverage to impart change? So we're looking for leverage on the system today. And then before we dive into that, let's look at the symbolism once again that Tesseract applies for us in this lesson today. You remember last couple of lessons, we talked about the Tesseract representing empowerment and then vision, the fact that we can predict what things will look like in the various dimensions of the Tesseract. And therefore, we can make predictions of the future, and thus we dealt with the vision of our schools. And so with that, I want to point out that we talked about last time the different points at the different dimensions. I also want to say that pattern of doubling every time, there's also another pattern for the number of sides, the number of edges, the number of cubes within this hypercube, each and every dimension. And each one has a different formula. They're more complex than the pattern last time, so I'm not going to take you through a math lesson like I did. But I am going to point out the idea of that there's this underlying structure to the Tesseract, and it applies to what we're doing here. Look at these folks. They're building this structure, and they're building it in such a way that they are confident that if they keep applying this structure, that they can build as high as they need to. In fact, they're so confident about their work that they're willing to stand on that structure with the confidence that it won't collapse. My question to us is, do we have structures in place that we are confident that the professional learning of our teachers and the academic learning of our students can be supported by those structures? And if not, then we need to change the structures. These structures also apply in nature. So I'm going to impress Tim Dignan in our group, and I'm going to give you a quick science lesson that if we were to dissect the Earth, you'll see that there's various layers underneath that affect things that go on the surface, like the magnetic field and other such things. The organisms on the surface of the Earth are affected by the structures that lie underneath the surface. So behavior can be affected by structure. We also know that behavior can affect structure. So at a molecular level, it's not the structure that affects the behavior, but the rules of how these atoms interact with each other ends up developing the structure of the molecule. So behavior can influence structure, structure can influence behavior. So you'll notice through all these examples, there's one word that keeps coming up, and that's the symbolism that Tesseract offers us today. We are going to be looking at structures. Structures specifically for our professional learning communities. So that's our objective today. Is we're going to actually get into the first part of the 6-year plan and lay out the long-term plan specifically for the PLC structures. Now in our Tesseract notes, there's quite a bit here that deals with PLC and with structure, but we're going to tackle the pre-unit, the intra-unit, the post-unit, what the PLC focus looks like in subsequent lessons. Right now, we're just looking at overall structures of our professional learning community. And in order to do that, I'm going to tap a very intelligent and motivating, inspirational person, Dr. Luis Cruz. Some of you may recognize him. He did some training for our district a couple of years ago. He was the principal of Baldwin Park, one of the schools that I've looked at, 6 years. Again, the 6-year plan. He came in and within 6 years took Baldwin Park from the athletic school in the district and the lowest performing academic school. And that athletic school ended up outperforming the quote unquote academic school. And now he's working with Solution Tree and doing PLC training around the nation. I had the pleasure of hearing him just last month at the national conference as well. So you're going to see he's got this definition of a PLC, the answer to this question, but there's a video here that I want us to look at and listen to, and then we're going to respond to it.
I'm going to say it's time for our PLC anymore, correct? All right, so everybody, here we go. Ready? We say it is a ongoing process whereby the educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry, figuring out why and determining how. And then we're going to take action to increase learning for all of our students. Everybody? Very good.
All right. I absolutely love that. I vaguely remember him doing that with us a couple of years ago in the training. You'll notice that a good portion of what he said is on this screen back here. Plus, there's some bonus verbiage there that I am going to post here so that we can read it a little more clearly. I've also taken that paragraph and I've broken it down to this list of structures within a well-defined professional learning community. So do we have that ongoing process? Are educators collaborating, or are they just meeting Monday mornings or Wednesday afternoons? Do we have continuous cycles of collective inquiry? Are they asking a question and then going out and collecting data on it? Are they doing the why and the how? Are they taking adult action? Do we have evidence that student learning is increasing? If not, then we don't have collaboration. We may have late start time. We may have release days, but we don't really have a professional learning community. And is it doing for all students? Is it being successful for all students? And the big thing is the assumption at the end. He didn't speak it, but it's the last sentence of that paragraph up at the top, that professional learning communities operate under the assumption that the key to improve student learning is the job-embedded learning for educators. Hey, that's one of our axioms. So that we're going to improve teachers through job-embedded learning for educators, or the PLC, well-defined PLC of our schools. All right. So with those things there, I want to also define the language I'm going to be using. Dr. Cruz and Tim Kainold and a lot of the people of all things PLC, as you see there, a lot of the PLC training, they talk about policies, practices, and procedures, or the routines that you go through at your school site. I just know here in our district, we tend to talk more things like systems, structures, and protocols. So I'm going to use that language, more of our local vernacular. But it's basically the same, talking the same things as the PLC. I'm not bringing anything new to you. I take that back. I'm going to bring one small thing. But the vast majority of it is basically things that we've seen from successful professional learning communities. So these are the structures that I have on the top of my head that I'm going to share with you here. The team leader training In other words, we tend to give time to, say, a geometry team or a fifth grade lead in elementary school, but have they been trained as to how to run those meetings and how to run the overall continuous cycle of collective inquiry? Team norms, have we set them, and are they being read before each meeting? Maybe we have a mission and a vision and some core values, but are we communicating those? Are those being read at the beginning of each meeting and out loud? And then do we have team BHAGs? Are the teams getting together for any reason other than they've been told they need to be in the same room at the same time? Have they been given something really exciting to rally around? Do we have the data, equipment, and software? And the reason I share that is when I get here to the Math TOSA role up here at the district office, one of the first things I did was survey all the schools to see why we weren't collecting data. And it turns out when I asked the question, how many teams could go, how many schools have the infrastructure, both the hardware and the software, that in one day they can go and take a test, scan in the results, and then print those results and bring them back to their team. And of the 27 schools that we have in our district, only 6 of them had that capability. So if we're going to be asking teams to collect data, we need to make sure that the support systems are in place for that. The reports, what do we want to monitor and what kind of information do we want to get back so that we, the leaders, can monitor the system? You don't know if your system's working appropriately without those reports. These are off the top of my head, numbers 1 through 6. I'm going to humble myself and encourage you to say that we were going to learn from each other here. That was one of the roles that we had. So I'm going to ask what else. Feel free to add anything to this list, but please communicate it to all of us so that we may all learn from each other. So with that said, here's your task. These are the structures. Here's the 6-year plan. The structures on the left are things that we're going to tackle, and we're only doing the top one today. I've given you 2 things that are going to help you do that, and I'm going to model them both for you today. The first one is student.desmos.com. It's an activity. I'm going to take you in there as it says, student. So I've set up an activity like I do as a teacher. I'm going to share that with you right now. Let's go to student.desmos.com. You're going to see this. I'm logged in, so it's saying hi to Chris here. It may ask you, do you want to sign in with Google or, and if it does, just say no, don't sign in, just continue. But I'm going to enter that code, which was Y9WPUU, and it's letting me join. And when you get in there, you should see this. Now, I had logged in before, so it's asking me to continue with the activity. I'm going to say yes. When you log in for the first time, though, yep, you should see this screen. It's asking you, what is your ultimate goal for your PLC? You'll notice in the plan, it starts at the end. We talked about that. At the end, what would you really want for your PLC? This is different than your BHAG. This is what do you want the vision to be for strictly just your PLCs. Not necessarily the school or the student learning, but if your PLC were running it on all cylinders, what would that look like? State that there. I'm going to give you an example of that in a moment. And then what you plan on your school structured professional climate to look and feel like. So what's the vision of your PLC? You're going to actually state that there, and then you'll click Share with Class. And then I've given you a card sort. So this is just to help you put these things together. You notice here some of the things that I've mentioned. I've mentioned reports, data equipment, all those things that I mentioned here are giving a specific card. And then we have these years. So I'm going to sort this out. This is exactly what the kids do. Of course, theirs is a math lesson. And so I'm going to put like year 0 here, year 1, year 2. Whoops. I can read that big enough. I don't need to enlarge that. I'm going to move year 3, 4. So you'll see what I'm doing here, 5 and 6. So I'm going to, where's year 5? There it is. And make some room here. So I am putting these all together here. Come on. How about if I, there we go, shrink that down a little bit so I can make room on my screen for year 6. There we go. And then here's what we're going to do. We're going to go and take each of these items and decide where in the year it should go. So let's say I decide, I think one of the first things I should do is team leadership training. I'm going to go and put that in year 1. So that's the first thing I'm going to do next year. Notice year 0 means right now, this spring and summer before we launch next year. Year 1 is next school year, and then subsequent, I'm going to go after that. I'm going to decide on reports. I'm going to put that in year 2. Wait a minute. I think it makes more sense to take reports and put it over here on year 0 and decide that this year. I'm just playing around showing you. You get to decide, but notice that you can unlink and link to these various years. You just have to roll them over, and then you can actually put 2 things in the same year or decide that you want to move that somewhere else. And so you get to mess around with this any way, shape, or form you wish. Put them all in there, and once all those cards are there, those are the 6 that I gave you, then we're going to go to this link that's in the Google Classroom. It will take you to this particular template. You're to make a copy of this for yourself, because right here, you're going to type your name, because in your copy, this will be yours. And then you get to type in at the top here the PLC structures according to the activity you just did, so then you can record them. I thought that the card sort activity would help you. You can move things around as you wish. But then here, we actually, move me up, can place those things, move them around a little easier in the card sort, and then you can write them in here. I'm going to show you this example. I did this with signature strategies, which we'll be discussing a little later on. What do we want teachers to be doing to support the mathematics in the class? And so you'll notice I started at the end. The ultimate goal of signature strategies is to have teachers teaching number sense and critical thinking, not just algorithms and procedures in the class. So that's the ultimate goal of the signature strategies. I have some signature strategies I've identified, and then I've decided I'm going to place them at these various years in the particular order. I'm going to go through that later on in the future, but you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3, number sense with number talks and clothesline, number sense with 4-digit problems and number tricks. Notice I'm not doing all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those all in 1 year. I've decided I'm going to stretch those out. I will say that there's follow through. In other words, once we introduce dual targets, the 3 reads help support the dual targets. Then there's reasoning routines, of which 3 reads is one of them. And then we'll do those. And then when we're doing number sense, we're still doing the dual targets, the 3 reads, and the reasoning routine. So keep that in mind, that once you introduce something, there's follow through the rest of the years. And that's how you're going to fill that out. So with that said, let's get you going. So you're going to do the Desmos activity and then fill out that Google form. That is what your goal is. That was our objective for the day. So once you have completed that, I've shared with you your instructions. So now I'm going to encourage you, go into Google Classroom, do those 2 things, because once you've done that, you will have taken your first steps in changing this world one math lesson at a time.